The aircraft descends through a wall of white. Below, nothing moves. No trees, no roads, no lights. Just an unbroken sheet of ice stretching to every horizon. Nearly 14 million square kilometers of frozen silence. Antarctica is the highest, driest, windiest, and coldest continent on the planet. Its average surface temperature hovers around -57 degrees Celsius in winter. In some valleys, no rain has fallen in 2 million years. Nothing here invites exploration. Everything here resists it. And yet, beneath this ice, in some places nearly 5 kilometers thick, something extraordinary exists. A world that has been sealed away from sunlight, from the surface, from the rest of life on Earth, for millions of years. A world of liquid water, of geological activity, of microbial life that may have evolved in complete isolation. A world of mountains taller than the Alps, of rivers longer than the Thames, of lakes as vast as the Great Lakes of North America. Scientists have known pieces of this story for decades, but only in the last 30 years, armed with satellite radar, deep ice drilling, and airborne geophysical surveys, have they begun to understand the true scale of what lies below. The questions this raises are not small ones. How did liquid water persist under kilometers of ice in one of the coldest places on Earth? What is alive down there? And what does it tell us about the possibility of life on other worlds? And perhaps most urgently, what happens to this hidden system when the ice above it begins to disappear? This is not a story about a remote wilderness at the bottom of the planet. This is a story about the foundation of Earth's climate system, the origins of life, and the slow unraveling of a world that most of humanity has never thought about and cannot afford to ignore. The investigation begins not at the surface, but below it. Antarctica's story as a known landmass begins in the early 19th century. Russian navigator Fabian von Bellingshausen sighted the Antarctic ice shelf in January 1820, followed within days by British and American expeditions. But the continent was not truly explored until much later. The heroic era of Antarctic exploration, Scott, Amundsen, Shackleton, belongs to the early 20th century, when men crossed its surface on foot and by dog sled, mapping coastlines and measuring temperatures, paying for knowledge with frostbite and, sometimes, their lives. But there is a second discovery of Antarctica, a quieter one, made not by explorers in woolen coats but by scientists with seismographs and radar instruments. This discovery began in earnest in the 1950s and 1960s, during the International Geophysical Year, when researchers first began using seismic sounding to probe the ice's depth. What they found rewrote everything. The continent beneath the ice is not flat. It is a complex, ancient landscape, a geological record stretching back over 1 billion years. The Transantarctic Mountains divide the continent into two distinct regions, East Antarctica, an ancient craton of Precambrian rock more than 1 billion years old, one of the oldest and most stable geological formations on the planet, and West Antarctica, a geologically younger and far more complex region, where the crust is thinner, rifted, and volcanically active in places. This matters for the ice above. East Antarctica's bedrock sits mostly above sea level, meaning even if its ice melted, the land would gradually rebound and much of it would remain above the ocean. West Antarctica is different. Parts of its bedrock lie more than 2 kilometers below sea level. The ice sitting above it rests on a submarine mountain range. If that ice were to retreat, the ocean would flood inland, a process that, once begun, is difficult to reverse. Antarctica was not always frozen. Geological evidence, fossilized tree stumps, leaf impressions preserved in Antarctic rock, tells us that 50 to 60 million years ago, the continent supported dense temperate forests. Crocodilians lived near its shores. The cooling began around 34 million years ago, when South America and Australia separated from Antarctica, opening the Drake Passage and allowing the Antarctic circumpolar current to form. This oceanic isolation locked Antarctica into a thermal envelope from which it has never escaped. The ice sheet began building, and as it grew, it buried everything beneath it, sealing an ancient world under kilometers of frozen time. To understand what exists beneath Antarctica's ice, one must first understand why liquid water can exist there at all. The answer begins with pressure and geothermal heat. Ice is an extraordinary insulator. As the ice sheet accumulates to depths of 3, 4, sometimes nearly 5 kilometers, the pressure at the base becomes immense. At those depths, the sheer weight of ice above lowers the melting point of ice below 0 Celsius. Simultaneously, the Earth's interior is not cold. Geothermal heat flows continuously upward through the bedrock at rates averaging between 50 and 60 milliwatts per square meter across Antarctica, and significantly higher in geologically active areas of West Antarctica. That combination, reduced melting point from pressure, steady heat from below, creates a basal melting layer. In many areas beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, the ice at its base is not frozen. It is liquid, and that liquid water has, over millions of years, pooled into lakes. The first subglacial lake in Antarctica was identified by Russian scientist Andrei Kapitsa in 1959, based on seismic data. But it was not until 1996, when satellite radar altimetry data was analyzed by British and Russian scientists, that the true scale of what lay beneath Lake Vostok was understood. Lake Vostok, named after the Russian research station above it, is not a pond. It is 450 kilometers long, 50 kilometers wide, and up to 1,000 meters deep. It contains an estimated 5,400 cubic kilometers of liquid water. It is the largest subglacial lake on Earth and the 6th largest lake in the world by volume. It has been sealed beneath the ice for an estimated 15 to 25 million years. Since Lake Vostok's full dimensions were confirmed, researchers have catalogued more than 400 subglacial lakes across Antarctica. Many are small. Some are vast. And they are not static. Satellite measurements of ice surface elevation, precise to centimeters, have revealed that Antarctica's subglacial lakes are actively filling and draining, connecting to one another through a network of subglacial rivers and channels. Water flows beneath the ice on timescales of years to decades, lubricating the base of glacier and affecting the speed at which they move toward the sea. This is not a dead system. It is dynamic, responsive, and deeply connected to what happens on the surface above it. In 1977, researchers diving to hydrothermal vents on the seafloor of the Galapagos Rift discovered something that altered the boundaries of biology. Life, dense, diverse, complex ecosystems of tube worms, clams, shrimp, and bacteria, thriving in complete darkness, under immense pressure, sustained not by photosynthesis but by chemosynthesis. The energy source was not sunlight. It was hydrogen sulfide from the Earth's interior. The discovery dismantled the assumption that life required the sun. It opened a new field of inquiry that eventually led scientists back to Antarctica. If life could survive at hydrothermal vents, could it survive in the perpetual darkness, extreme pressure, and isolation of a subglacial Antarctic lake? The first serious attempt to answer this question focused on Lake Vostok. Drilling had been underway at the Russian Vostok station since the 1970s, initially for climate research. The ice core extracted from Vostok is one of the most important climate records in history, extending back 800,000 years and preserving trapped air bubbles that contain samples of ancient atmosphere. In February 2012, after 20 years of intermittent drilling, the Russian drill finally breached the ice above Lake Vostok and made contact with the lake water below. What came back up the borehole, lake water that refroze around the drill tip, was immediately analyzed for biological content. The results were contentious. Initial reports claimed detection of bacterial DNA unlike anything in known databases. Subsequent analyses suggested contamination could not be entirely ruled out. The scientific community urged caution. But the debate itself was significant. It confirmed that the question of life in Antarctica's subglacial lakes was not theoretical. It was answerable, and the answer, whatever it proved to be, would matter enormously. More rigorous results came from a different lake. In January 2013, a team of American scientists led by John Priscu of Montana State University drilled into Lake Whillans in West Antarctica, a shallower, more recently isolated lake approximately 800 meters beneath the ice. The drilling operation used hot water, and every component was sterilized meticulously to eliminate contamination. Samples retrieved from the lake water contained microbial cells. More than 3,000 distinct species of bacteria and archaea were identified. The organisms were metabolically active, deriving energy from the oxidation of iron, sulfur, and ammonium compounds in the absence of any sunlight. Life in Lake Whillans was not marginal. It was a functioning ecosystem. The implications were immediate, and they extended far beyond Antarctica. If microbial life can survive for millions of years in sealed, lightless, high-pressure liquid water beneath kilometers of ice, then the same conditions elsewhere in the solar system, beneath the ice shell of Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus, whose subsurface ocean vents organic material into space, are not incompatible with life. Antarctica's subglacial lakes have become, in the minds of astrobiologists, the closest analog on Earth to the most promising habitable environments beyond it. For most of human history, Antarctica's ice sheet was understood as something permanent, a fixture of the planet's geography as reliable as the continents themselves. That understanding has been revised. The ice sheet is losing mass. This is not disputed. The data is extensive, multi-sourced, and mutually consistent. Measurements from NASA's GRACE satellite mission, which tracks minute changes in Earth's gravitational field caused by shifting mass, show that Antarctica has been losing ice at an accelerating rate. Between 1992 and 2017, the continent shed approximately 2,800 billion tons of ice. The rate of loss in the period from 2012 to 2017 was 3 times higher than the rate measured from 1992 to 1997. The primary driver in East Antarctica is increased snowfall, which actually adds mass to the ice sheet. But in West Antarctica, and particularly along the Antarctic Peninsula, the drivers are warmer ocean waters and rising air temperatures. The result is net loss. The subglacial world is directly implicated in this process. Here is where the physics becomes critical. The ice sheet does not simply melt from above. Warm circumpolar deep water, a relatively warm water mass that circulates at depth around Antarctica, has been intruding beneath the ice shelves, the floating extensions of the ice sheet that extend over the ocean. These shelves act as buttresses. They slow the flow of glacier behind them. When they thin or retreat, the glacier accelerate. Thwaites Glacier in West Antarctica has become the focal point of this concern. Thwaites is enormous, roughly the size of Great Britain, and it is melting faster than any comparable glacier on Earth. It currently contributes approximately 4% of global sea level rise annually. Scientists refer to it informally as the Doomsday Glacier, not out of hyperbole but because of what lies behind it. Thwaites is a cork in a bottle. Beneath and behind it, the West Antarctic ice sheet rests on bedrock that descends inland in a configuration that makes it vulnerable to a process called marine ice sheet instability, a self-reinforcing feedback loop in which retreat exposes deeper, more vulnerable ice, which melts faster, which drives further retreat. In 2023, results from the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, a joint British-American research program, revealed the presence of warm water flowing through a cavity beneath Thwaites approximately 40 meters high and 5 kilometers wide. The melt from below is active and accelerating. The ice above is weakening. Internal fractures visible from satellite imagery suggest that portions of the glacier's floating ice shelf could collapse within 3 to 5 years. If Thwaites were to collapse entirely, a process that could unfold over decades to centuries, the resulting sea level rise would be approximately 65 centimeters. That alone would redefine coastlines worldwide. But Thwaites is also the gateway to the broader West Antarctic ice sheet. Full destabilization of that system would eventually contribute 3 to 5 meters of sea level rise. That is not a projection for tomorrow. It is a trajectory already in motion, the endpoint of which depends on decisions made in the present. Antarctica has long suffered from a particular category of misrepresentation, one that simultaneously understates its complexity and overstates our certainty about it. The most persistent misconception is that Antarctica is simply a large version of the Arctic, a mass of ice floating on cold water, symmetrical, comprehensible, governed by predictable dynamics. In fact, Antarctica is a continent, not an ocean, and the differences this creates are profound. It contains 90% of Earth's surface freshwater and 70% of all freshwater. Its ice sheet has influenced global sea levels and ocean salinity for 30 million years. It drives global ocean circulation patterns. The Antarctic bottom water, dense, cold, oxygen-rich water formed when sea ice freezes and expels salt, sinks to the deepest parts of the world's oceans and drives the global thermohaline circulation that moderates climate across every inhabited continent. This is not a remote system. It is a planetary thermostat. A second misconception concerns the timescale of change. Ice sheets are often discussed as though their response to warming is slow, measured in centuries, perhaps millennia. In some respects this is true, but the subglacial system operates on faster timescales than the ice above it. Subglacial lakes can drain in months. Basal melt can accelerate glacial flow within years. Tipping points in marine ice sheet dynamics, once crossed, are not reversible on human timescales. The assumption that there is time, ample, comfortable time, to study, to deliberate, to eventually act, is contradicted by the evidence accumulating from beneath the ice. There is also a geopolitical misconception worth addressing directly. Antarctica is governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, signed in 1959 and now ratified by 54 nations. The treaty designates the continent as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science, prohibiting military activity and mineral resource exploitation. It has largely succeeded in preserving this status. But the treaty's Protocol on Environmental Protection, signed in 1991, includes a provision that allows for review of the prohibition on mineral extraction after 50 years, meaning that mechanism becomes available from 2041. With confirmed deposits of coal, iron ore, and potentially significant hydrocarbon reserves beneath the ice, the geopolitical pressure on this provision is real and growing. The Antarctic Treaty is not a permanent solution. It is a managed truce. The next decade of Antarctic science will be unlike any before it. 3 major drilling projects are currently in various stages of development, each targeting a different scientific question with extraordinary ambition. The oldest ice on Earth is believed to lie in the deep East Antarctic Plateau, in a region called Little Dome Sea, where ice possibly 800,000 to 1.5 million years old may still be intact. The Beyond Epica project, a European consortium, aims to drill to this ice and extract a climate record extending back 1.5 million years. This would span the transition between a world of 41,000-year glacial cycles and the 100,000-year cycles of the more recent Pleistocene. Understanding this transition would fundamentally improve the accuracy of climate models. Simultaneously, the search for life in subglacial lakes continues. Lake Sex in West Antarctica, discovered in 2014, named for the Chilean Center for Scientific Studies, is now targeted for direct sampling. It is larger than Lake Whillans and more deeply isolated. If its microbial ecosystem differs significantly from the organisms found in Whillans, the variation would suggest that subglacial lakes have evolved distinct biological lineages in isolation, a natural experiment in evolution with no equivalent elsewhere on Earth. Thwaites itself remains the subject of the most urgent monitoring program in modern glaciology. The ongoing deployment of autonomous underwater vehicles, submarines small enough to navigate the cavity beneath the ice shelf, is producing the first direct measurements of the melt rates, water temperatures, and sediment dynamics at the glacier's grounding line, the point where the glacier's base lifts off the seafloor and begins to float. What these vehicles find in the next 5 years will determine whether current sea level projections require significant upward revision. Beyond monitoring, there is serious scientific discussion of intervention. Proposals exist, some conceptual, some in early modeling stages, to slow or halt the retreat of Thwaites through engineering. One concept involves constructing an underwater sill, a physical barrier, across the bay beneath the glacier's ice shelf to block the inflow of warm water. Another proposes pumping cold surface water beneath the ice to counteract basal melting. These are not fantasies. They are proposals being evaluated by serious scientists. The barriers are immense, logistical, financial, and political. But the fact that intervention is being discussed at all is a measure of how seriously the threat is now taken. And beneath the ice, in the sealed lakes and ancient bedrock, the instruments of understanding multiply. Ice-penetrating radar surveys are now conducted from aircraft, mapping the basal topography of the continent with resolutions impossible a decade ago. Machine learning algorithms are being applied to radar datasets to identify previously undetected lake systems. Satellite constellations track ice velocity across the entire continent at intervals of weeks. What emerges from this accumulation of data is not reassurance. It is resolution. The picture of what lies beneath becomes clearer, and the clearer it becomes, the more precisely the stakes can be understood. There is something philosophically vertiginous about Antarctica's subglacial world, not because it is mysterious, but because of what it reflects back at us. For 800,000 years, the ice cores extracted from the East Antarctic Plateau have recorded every significant shift in Earth's atmosphere. The concentration of carbon dioxide in air bubbles trapped 100,000 years ago. The sulfuric acid fallout from volcanic eruptions before human civilization began. the isotopic signature of water from monsoons that fed rivers long since dry. This is an archive of the planet's climate written in ice, and it ends, as all such records eventually must, at the surface, where the present has deposited its own layer. That layer is chemically distinctive. The ratio of industrial isotopes in the upper ice is unlike anything in the 800,000 years below it. It represents an interruption of a pattern that had persisted across dozens of glacial cycles, through the rise and fall of ice ages, through the emergence of every living species on the continent. It is, in the most literal sense, a mark left in the planet's permanent record. The subglacial lakes have persisted in their darkness for tens of millions of years. Life in them has survived without sunlight, without the surface, without any connection to the larger biological world. It has endured asteroid impacts, ice ages, warm periods, the shifting of continents. The ice above it has been both its prison and its protector, sealing it away from competition, from predation, from extinction events that remade the rest of life on Earth. Now the ice is changing, not because of what lies beneath it, but because of what moves above it, in the atmosphere, in the ocean, in the systems of energy and industry that human civilization has built. The process that sealed these lakes in the first place is being altered by agents that the organisms inside them have never encountered and cannot respond to. This is not a story that resolves neatly. There is no discovery that nullifies the physics of a warming ocean. There is no expedition that reverses the retreat of a glacier already in motion. The questions that Antarctica raises, about life, about climate, about the longevity of systems we have barely begun to understand, do not have answers that fit comfortably within a single human generation. What science has done, in the last half-century, is remove the veil. The mountains under the ice are real. The lakes under the ice are real. The life under the ice is real. The instability gathering at the margins is real. None of this was visible until we looked, carefully and persistently, with instruments capable of seeing through 5 kilometers of frozen time. The ice kept its secrets for 30 million years. It will not keep them much longer. And what we do with the knowledge now emerging from beneath it, that, finally, is not a question of science. It is a question of what kind of civilization we intend to be.